Welcome to stone setting. I've got a lot of projects. We're going to kind of go at this however it happens. I've got some things to show you. I'm going to, I especially was thinking about you that, like, have you done bezels and things like that?
No, really, I've done prongs, but no bezels.
Okay.
So I was hoping you'd do that today.
All right.
Bezels are easier.
Yeah, bezels are much easier. Well, you can make them complicated. If you really want to, you can make them complicated. How about... That's what I'm looking for. All right, so I brought in some of the weirder things, basically to give you an overview of what stone setting can be. People get stuck in thinking that it's going to be, bezel set cabochons, or it's prong set diamonds, or, it can be really anything you want. Just concentrate on the fact that setting a stone is nothing more than trapping an object in metal, bending the metal over so that it captures the item and holds it in place. And that can be done in 1,000 different ways. I mean, and you can make them up till the cows come home and you will still never even scratch the surface. All right. Here's your traditional cabochon with a regular bezel. Flat back, rounded top, bezel wire goes over the side. This is bezel wire right here. Often, or the majority of the time, if you're working in silver, bezel wire will be pure silver, comes in a lot of different widths. If in doubt, get the whitest stuff you can, and you can always cut it down. Okay. Occasionally, you will find some very large stones that you need to make stuff for. If you have access to a rolling mill, you can always melt down your bezel into a blob and then send it through the rolling mill, and then take out your square and cut out an extra wide strip out of it. I've done that a bunch of times. It's fairly easy to do, and then that allows you to have bezel wire whatever width you need it to be, in case you're getting into crazy stones. All right. Now, when you go from bezels, and then we've got what's called a hammered bezel. These are exceedingly thick bezel walls. I think that one was like a 16 gauge or thicker. I tend to work with a lot of really heavy duty silver. Do not try that with soft stones. Well, or you can. It's actually fairly easy on the stone. Not, I wouldn't go too far, but it is very nerve-wracking to do that. This one I did with this hammer, and this stone was very precious to me. And you had to sit here, and every time you struck the bezel wall, you would have to strike it just enough on the side that it bent it over without hitting the stone. And I did hit the stone once. It survived, barely. So this is the same idea as this, just it requires more force. And I'll show you an easier way to do this maneuver here. Then you can get into hybrids of prongs versus, we'll call it like a bezel setting. It's a little bit of both. Whereas your normal faceted stone or engagement solitaire or something like that would be, you know, the stone completely off the ground, supported by nothing but the prongs. This has a base, but it's being held in place by prongs. All right, this is a weird experimental ring that my wife immediately latched onto, and this is the first time I've seen it in like a month and a half since I made it. I didn't even get to finish it or polish it or anything. She's like, "Oh, that's neat." Yeah. Yeah. So I want you to look at that and realize that you can take any stone, no matter what shape, and hold it down to a flat surface or a customized mount or some sort of base for it. And so long as it's relatively, you know, flush, you just curl the prongs over the top and that will hold it in place. So then that now opens up anything, okay, whatever you want.
That's so cool. It's really pretty. So it's kind of similar to a cathedral setting? Sort of? Not really?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what a cathedral setting is.
How'd you do your detail there? Like between the two prongs, how that comes in there?
Okay. When you, like, I don't like leaving stuff plain or raw edges or things like that. With that, you can either take a ruby burr. We were talking about that. Basically, you grind that into place. What I like to do is take a scribe and I will okay, take the scribe and then scratch a line and go over it a couple times. Then take a burr, make a divot, and then once the divot is deep enough that I know that the ruby stone won't skip out of there.
Right.
So once it's deep enough
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I can
yeah.
follow that line, then I'll just go over it and
Really
over it.
hardcore stuff.
Now, it takes a couple minutes. It's not really a very difficult operation. But then that gets the line or the detail or whatever it is in there. And then I'll attack it and go as deep as I want it to be. And then I take those bristle discs and I go over the whole surface and that rounds everything out.
The bristle, the little paintbrush type things
Yep.
that I got? Okay.
Yeah. Go really coarse, get the yellow ones, the 80 grit, and then that removes all the sharp detail and kind of blends everything and smooths it together. And then it makes it look a little more natural.
Were those the ones with the little fingers on them
Yep.
from 3M? Okay.
Yeah, those are really good. Didn't even get to finish it, but those are really good about, you know, taking little things and kind of smoothing them into the rest of
That's great.
the project. All right, so now you'll have to forgive me. Some of these are half-finished experiments, but now you can sit down with wire, and I am very fond of spheres, so I've been spending a lot of time trying to make up like homemade ideas for how to hold a sphere in place and have it look appropriate. So if you were to take this, now I think this sphere is a little on the small side for this setting, but so long as the prongs go beyond the midway point and then curl over the midway, do not cut them short before you bend them. All right? Having extra wire on there while you're trying to get the prong into place is very, very helpful. If you try to cut the prong to its appropriate final length and then put it into place, you don't have the leverage and you'll never get it there. All right? So. And then I brought like a basket of the most horrendous stuff to set I have ever seen, and things that have given me trouble over the years. So, you know, and we can play How Would You? Now, Yeah, that one started becoming a real pain in my neck, so I kind of took a break from it.
That's gorgeous. Yeah, the detail on the bottom is nice.
This is really cool.
Yep, and when you think about it, that's just square wire. That's all that is. I mean, I made a little cross, then shaped some to go in between each point, and then these are just little half moons. Basically square jump rings cut in
How did
half.
you get it all flush on the bottom?
I worked with it flat. Then you put it into a dapping block.
And then you dap it around and form it over the...
Right.
Okay.
Always work flat if you can. Do not attempt to work on a circle. If you
I've
have,
done that. It's
Sure.
maddening
Yeah, you can do it.
because you're doing basically 8 little prongs at once,
Right.
which I've done, and it was a really good one.
Okay, here's another one that I started, and then I went a different
Is it
direction.
that crown or something?
Exactly. So this is square wire with little half circles. I'm sorry, ladies.
8143 East Dewey Robbins Road.
Yeah, again, I started having trouble with it and I put it to the side, but it was very, very easy to make. So, you know, and you could do that with round wire, you do that with square wire. I find that square wire works very good for prongs. Round wire, you can use that as well, but you're gonna have to cut into it and shape it a little bit more than you would with square.
Don't have much of it I got.
So basically, use whatever works for you or whatever you have.
Well, it's easier to solder square to square than it is round to round.
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
surface contact, similar
You
to
get
welding, it
the-
makes it
yeah,
easier.
Mhm.
better contact, sure.
Yeah,
Now, each one of those little points would then become your prong. So you can, you know, if you've got an oval mandrel or ovals are the bane of my existence. I don't know why, but I've always had trouble setting those. But you know, you can shape the base to whatever you need it to be. So if it's going to be a round, all right, then make a round. If it's a square, you can cut the square. I made this flat and then curled it around and then soldered it, then put it over a mandrel and then hammered it into shape. Again, don't try to work with it in the round. It's a really surefire way to just ruin your day.
So you made just like a strip.
There you go.
Form it over,
That's
solder it.
so much.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Okay, and then we've got,
So basically, it all boils down to cut down to as few dimensions as you can. If you can work in 1 or 2 dimensions, work in 1 or 2. The moment you throw in a third dimension, trying to form things and get them to agree,
yes,
it's really
yes.
difficult.
And then always when you consider your construction, break it up into like the base shapes. Here's going to be this part of the pendant. Here's going to be the second half. Here's going to be the third half. And maybe each one of those is part of 4 or 5 different pieces. Solder all those together using hard solder. Solder all these together using hard solder. Solder all these together with hard solder. Then everything's got as much of the best solder as possible in use, and then you put it together using medium. And save the easy for the times when you've messed up or you've forgotten something. And, you know, the extra easy, which is, I shudder to think of how much is on there. Because once you start using extra easy solder, you've painted yourself into a corner. And
That's all you can use from then on. You got to be really careful.
you got it. I would say about 40% of that is extra easy solder because it was like playing whack-a-mole with that. And every time I got to the end and went to finish something, something broke over and over and over again. And every time I'm like, oh, I'll just use extra easy solder. It will be a breeze. And then it got to the point where every time I'm soldering something here, something opens up over here. And then over here, and over here, and I've got heat sinks all over it.
Yeah.
And it turned into a fiasco. All right. So, I've been dying, I've never set a princess
All right.
or a square or whatever you want to call it And I found that last night, and you guys are gonna get to watch me attempt that. Now, what's the worst part about setting that stuff? How are you gonna set it? Here. You need to capture that.
Corners,
Yeah.
and
What-
sometimes they're split. So they go around. So tiny.
So,
You put one prong and then you split it, so it goes around the corners,
you got it.
right?
Oh.
So
I just did
you
one of
set
these
the prongs
yesterday.
initially at the four corners.
Did the
rather
prongs
than-
We'll get to
on
the
sides,
house
not
here in
on
a
the
second.
corners.
Sorry.
What's that?
I just did one of those and set the prongs on the sides.
That's another way to do it. The only drawback, no, that works great. And then you can actually put a princess into a round brilliant
Yes.
setting
Yeah.
and, call it a day. If it's a once in a while ring, I wholeheartedly,
It's for a necklace, so.
right, perfect.
Yeah,
The only
otherwise the
drawback
corners
is
can
it,
get
it,
chipped.
yeah, it leaves the corners exposed.
Yeah, no, it's for a necklace, so.
Yeah, if it's a good art ring where somebody's gonna put it on, wear it to a party, and then take it off about 3 hours later, fantastic. Go nuts, do whatever weird design you wanna do.
What's the most secure, solid, like it's gonna last 40 years type of prong?
For what shape of stone?
That one.
For that, there are these big, heavy, what is it, the Tiffany V corner?
Yeah.
But those, you gotta do a lot of extra work on those. Because each corner is going to be this very heavy walled V. And the corner of the stone will sit down in there. Now, you have to cut a seat into each corner or each side of that V. And then you've got to cut a roundish channel in the corner.
Why?
Because the corner sits in that. It does not actually make contact with the seat of the metal.
Wow.
So you're going to fold it over.
So you're gonna hollow out a space and
Right.
create like
But-
two seats.
Those little tiny corners will actually sit in a little hidden hollow pocket area.
Yeah.
Basically like a billiard pocket. That's almost exactly what it's going to look like. And then underneath the bezel top, or however you choose to close it, that corner will sit free.
Wow.
Now-
I'm drawing what you're saying, like I'm paying attention.
Yeah, that's fine.
I remember my notebook. Doodling that stuff too.
Want some paper?
Oh, no. I've got a notebook at the house that I've got stuffed with all kinds of crazy, weird ideas. I wish I'd have thought to bring it.
Now, what we're going to try to do, what I'm going to try to do, is I made this setting. I made a couple of them last night. And we're going to place this in there. And this is you can call it a bunch of different things, but it's basically exactly Diane Davis. Thank you for the name.
I wore it today.
What she suggested. Now you can buy pre-made mountings like that. There's a good friend of ours named Georgie Torres that works over on Park Avenue Jewelers. I got to sit down when he did my engagement ring, and he just basically took a round piece of wire. Okay. And here, I'm going to use giant wire to make my point with. I think what he used was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 21 gauge, something like that. So what I had was an antique setting, and we were going to put a Paraiba tourmaline on the top of it, little tiny guy. And he cut out the center diamond on it and then dropped in, he basically cut the seat of the shape of the stone and then went around and cut little divots. So basically you would have I want to put a pool on how long it takes me to drop that.
The stone?
Yeah.
2
5 minutes? I'll go 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll go 2.
All right. So you would come around the corner of the stone. So it was an oval, and then on 4 points on the oval, he cut a notch.
Could you move your basket so I can see?
Certainly. I don't know why I'm doing this and not on scratch paper, but you want me to try that again with scratch paper? I think that would be a better idea.
Don't mess
I'll
up
give
your
it a
silver.
difference.
It's silver. You just polish out, burnish it out. It's just little scratches.
People invest in a whiteboard next time.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I think next time I come down to buy a whole mess of tools from you guys, I'll just bring one for you. We got like 6 sitting at the house because of the kids.
What's that?
The whiteboards, dry erase whiteboards, magnetic kind, so you can use little magnets.
Oh, neat.
I'm not sure why I did that. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Okay, so he cut the hole in the center of the ring. And, it had several little tiny diamonds set around the main, and then there was a center diamond there. So we took that out, and then he cut the hole, and then he went in with it's a cross-cut cylinder burr. Okay, pass that out.
Okay.
And what he did was basically he found one of those that was the exact, let's call it gauge size of the wire that we were going to place. So he took that and made a notch in each corner. And then took some white gold wire and then put it in each one of these little notches and soldered it in place. And it's the exact same idea as this. So that just went around. This one's going to go around the corner. This one was just basically you're taking 4 prongs and turning it into 8, so it's a more secure hole.
So did he saw the wire or just use
Just-
the
Left it like that, soldered the bottom, cut off the excess once it was soldered, and then folded these over as the prongs, and then cut off the excess.
So did you carve 2 little notches for
Nope.
both pieces of wire?
It was wide enough for
Wide enough.
the both.
It was wide
to
enough.
go both.
Yeah, so then that part just dropped down into the side. Very easy, took
Sure.
no time at all.
Wow.
Neat, that's a neat idea.
Now, remember, I mean, you want to set a stone, just, take your burrs, take a drill, and this is going to be your pilot hole. Bzz, drill through. Never do your cutting with your setting burr. This should only be brought in, a setting burr should only be brought in at the very end just to cut the seat. These suckers are kind of pricey, and you need them to be exact and sharp. So don't make them do the heavy work. Okay? Use stuff like a round ball burr or things like that to cut out, make the room, and then bring in your cutting burr at the very end just to put that bevel on. All right, so this is going to be your friend. This is a dop stick. Dop stick means different things to different people. If you're a lapidary person, it's a dowel with green wax that's the hardest stuff known to man. And it will glue a stone in place while you're working on it. If you're a stone setter, then it's this very soft, sticky type of wax that attracts cat hair and dust, and you use it for manipulating small stones. Okay? If you try to work with a stone without something like that, you will go nuts.
Don't Try to use the modeling wax that you'd use to build rings and stuff with to do that.
You can use sticky wax.
It doesn't work as well.
It tends to.
And it came off.
Well, no, the true sticky wax is so sticky that you can't get it back off. And then you end up with a big blob of it on top of the stone.
That has to come off.
Acetone.
Oh, okay.
He does faceting.
All right. So you'll have that on hand, and it's a nice hold. So you can put that in, put your fingernail on top, and then then you can take a look. Another really good piece of advice is check everything often. You're going to have this while you're cutting your seats. You're going to put this in, check it, take it back out. And I mean, you're going to work for 30 seconds, put the stone back in, check it, take it back out, constantly. When you're working on, especially if you're on the final stages of a very nice piece of jewelry, there's not much going back. I mean, you can fix it, but you're at the final stages, and if you have to replace a prong or something like that, that's going to be a lot of extra work. So you really need to make sure you do it right the first time.
I'm just standing because it's hard to set that.
All right. Okay, let's try this out. So, not even sure if I have what I need. Optimizers are a really good idea. I have two of them with me today, number 3 and a number 7. Number 7 is really, really strong, and I use it for pretty much nothing except wax carving and stone setting. Number 3 is a good all-purpose. 3s, 4s, and 5s are like a good across the spectrum. When you put your optimizer on, put it on the back of your head, not like this. This will give you a headache. This, you don't have to tighten down, and it sits nice and loosely on top of your head. All right. Sorry, that was a recent discovery for me, so. All right. Now, I'm trying to judge what would make for a good cut in these prongs. And they're already notched. I'm going to give them just a little extra. And I want something that's going to be about, what's a good way to describe this? There's the distance of the prongs from one another. And this is not a formula or anything like that. This is just how I'm thinking about it. There's the distance between the prongs. And there's the size of the stone. So basically, I'm looking through the burrs that I have to find something that would be about that far and how far across the stone it's going to be and the angle in the bottom. So I want as close as I can without going over. All right, so I want to make a notch with 1 or 2 taps of the flex shaft that's going to be as close as possible to the shape of the stone, shape and size. That makes sense? Okay. If I'm not careful, I go into ramble mode. And it makes perfect sense to me. Everybody's looking at me funny.
They do anyway. I do the same thing. My kids get so angry at me. I'll be like, oh, I just wanted to know this. Well, how can you know this if you don't know this, this, and this?
All started back in the 1800s. What? No!
Pull up a seat.
My dad was so bad about that. He'd go off on his 4-hour lectures. I'm going to take a nap. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm very carefully going to take this burr and find the most comfortable position you can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move each one down, and then And I'm very lightly gonna come in, let's see. Actually, it'd probably be better if I came at it sideways. Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, so come down and then just lightly kiss the prongs, in theory. Now, I'm going to warn you that setting burrs in a flex shaft are one of the most unruly things in the world, and they will get away from you so fast. It's what's called walking. And what they want to do is as soon as you touch that, it wants to go around the prong and murder it. That's its purpose in life, is to kill prongs. Now, I found a good way to combat that. There's a gentleman online that suggests if you have a SR motor or a reversible motor that you actually run the burr in reverse with the teeth, which is actually against the way it should be cutting. It cuts much slower. It's not as effective, but it's far, far more controllable. So you can get a really nice notch and get the shape that you want, and then, you know, I know that that's probably going to make some people squirm, that you're not doing that the right way, but I have tried it, and it works like a charm.
Because if I may interject, a lot of times they suggest when you're running your motors is to use a limiter on them, and so that they don't spin for more than, say, 5,000 RPMs at a time, which is not even a third of how fast these motors can
Yeah.
go.
Just an aside note, that's a good point. I'd say that one of the lessons that took me the longest to learn about making jewelry is that all your time should be spent in the very lowest end of the flex shaft. You should be going very slow. Rarely are you ever going to run that thing flat out. Okay. Well, enough procrastination. Let's try this. And I mean, keep the pressure really light. Oh, forgot an important step. I should have a fine Sharpie here to mark where on the and basically what I would do if I thought to bring my Sharpie would have been on the outside, make a little mark, and then remember whether or not you want to be on the mark, above the mark, or below the mark. And then be consistent. You can also do things like use your dividers to set the angle from the top of the prong where I need to be. So I can do that with this one, and I'm going to do it so that this will rest on top of the prong, the one leg, the other one will score it, and I'm going to be cutting just above the score mark. That will be my, that way we get a consistent cut on each of the prongs. Okay. That's not going to work. I'm going to just wing it, guys. See how it goes. Just take a moment, really try to get it into your brain where everything should be. You should also take a moment and like adjust your prongs and make sure that they're all touching at just the right angles and that everything's in place before you cut. There it goes. visually confirm that you got everything, and then check. Actually, don't do that. I'm sure I'll find out what went wrong here in a second. Okay. So what I'm doing is cutting a seat. So you've got the prong, and the stone's going to sit somewhere right down here. What is it? The girdle. So we need to cut a notch out of each prong where the stone can sit, so that you can fold the prong over and the stone will get trapped. Basically, you're making a pinch point so that the stone will fit into here, and you're folding it over and it gets trapped. If you don't cut a prong, then A, the prong doesn't know where to bend. B, the stone, as you try to fold it over, just kind of squirts out the top. This way, we tell it where to sit, how to sit, and it gives it a nice, stable base to sit on.
And I do that with a file. Is that a bad thing to do?
No.
I keep thinking that too. That's the way I learned.
That's,
Jeweler's
yeah.
file.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
What is a file except another
Right.
Mhm.
You just have,
same thing?
And it doesn't walk away.
it's
on you.
safer.
The only thing is that this has the exact angle on it, and while it is harder to control, it is easier to match the angle that I need that cut to be.
Okay.
I don't think that if your way works for you, go for it.
Okay.
I mean, all of these tools are all different ways to cut or mash metal. They all do very similar jobs in different ways. So if you find that one works better for you than the other, go for it. All right, so. You know what, let's just do this. Okay. So. Now, just like you would a bezel, you do not go all the way. When you're bending your prongs, do not go for it right off the bat. Opposite sides, and you're just gonna make tiny little adjustments until it really starts to get in there and grabs the stone. If you push too far, then you nudge the stone one direction, and then when it goes to the other side, it's sitting a little bit higher, and then it's captured and it's off kilter, and then you've got to go back and open everything back up again and reseat it and undo it. It is time for these. All right. I'm sorry I don't have a microscope or anything that I can show you guys. But you work at opposing corners. And what I've got in my hand is what's called a prong pusher. Go figure. I've got a little bit of that sticky wax on the surface of the stone, so it keeps wanting to stick to my finger. And it's also, I kind of forgot to do this at the beginning, but make sure that you make some sort of notation about how you are, what direction or the orientation of the stone is. Especially with something like this, I should have made sure that, you know, this corner goes to this set of prongs, because you're going to be the nicer the job, the more you're going to customize each prong to that stone, especially if you've got an unusual stone that's going to have an odd shape. This is like one of the very first and nicest stones that I have, and it is an absolutely beautiful spessartite. It is, however, very awkwardly cut. It is not perfect by any means. So when I go to set that, I'm going to have to get creative, and there's going to be different angles on each prong. And it's important that you remember which one's where. Get yourself a little tiny silver fine Sharpie and put a dot right on the stone, let it dry, and then, then make some sort of black mark on the prong that dot belongs towards. But right now, we're kind of at the just get it done phase. And it's already to a point where it doesn't quite fit if I don't put it in right. All right. And what this is, it's just basically steel square rod. And it has a flat surface on the end that I have roughed up a little bit. Not much, but enough that it has a little more grip than a piece of smooth steel. And I'm using this on each of the prongs to push and bend them over. That's all it is. It's like a little flat anvil pushing point.
Now, I've seen on YouTube some of the guys, some of the stone setters on there will go and put a slight concave
Mhm.
to the surface. Is that just to keep the tool from slipping?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would probably work just fine. Sucker wants to escape so bad. And if you're angry or anxious or anything like that, do this another time. Let me see. Now, get away from me. A pair of good flat nose and parallel jaws are not a bad idea either. These are fantastic when you have to adjust an entire prong and do it forward to back. Since these come down parallel, it grabs the entire prong and holds it, and then you can bend it all the way at the base. And then just regular little flat nose are good for making these little adjustments back and forth with the tip of the prong, although you want to keep that to a minimum because these suckers will snap off and they don't need much of a reason to do it. So, how y'all been? Any exciting story? The stones like it when you talk to them.
I dropped it.
Yep. I dropped it.
At least it's relatively big.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can discuss Millie here in a second.
Millie.
Did I bring my Millie diamonds with me?
Oh
No.
gosh.
Little teeny tiny ones.
Yeah. I forget how small those go, but I bought some on eBay and I got them and oh jeez. I am not attempted to do that.
Need see-through hands. Getting great shots of the back of your hand.
Hi everybody.
Maybe it's better from this side.
Well, I'm trying to stay out of your way. This is for people who couldn't make it.
Well, for those of us that did, just come back to reference it later, 'cause that's what I will be
I
doing.
will too.
Good. Glad you guys are getting something out of it. I apologize. This is kind of a moment of discovery for me too. And I really wish I had made some sort of notation on the, because that is causing me no end of trouble.
Live and learn, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, exactly where that silver Sharpie is too.
We're all holding our breath.
Yeah. It's kind of to that point where, is that the right direction? Do I just need to press? Oh, no, that's not the right direction, and then. This is crazy. I know this one in here. There we go. stay down. Oh, that looks much better than I figured.
And what is that tool called that you're using? That flat one?
This one?
No,
Oh, the other
this
one, yeah.
The butt end of a pair of tweezers.
Oh,
Okay.
Very,
that was
very
something
technical.
special. I couldn't see it.
You're doing that to hold the stone in place while you're bringing
You
it
say, I
down.
need one of those.
Basically,
Yeah.
actually, it's something I use fairly often.
Yeah.
But just take the flat end of a pair of tweezers. It also does not stick to the wax quite as much, so that
Okay.
the stone doesn't pop up, which is one of the things that's causing me trouble.
Okay. I'm glad to know I already have it.
Yeah.
Got like 3 of those sitting at
Yeah.
home.
You will be surprised at how creative you get when you're sitting here and you go, I need a thing that does this. And you know, and you're looking around, you go, that.
Yeah.
Give me that.
I thought it was
work.
one of those, 1,000 tools I don't have yet.
Oh, I'm sure someone will. A stone
Presser.
presser thing.
You guys can sell it. Stone hold down tool.
There
Doubles
you
as a
go.
pair of tweezers.
Well, it's black, mine are silver, so I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, that's so you don't want it to be reflective. That would throw off the color of the
That's why you
stone.
need to make it.
We're getting to the point where this is getting exasperating / exciting.
Time to move on.
I can get that prong over the edge. Oh, it will not go quietly. I really must come out of there. Okay. No, that didn't go quite as planned. I need to, one of the sides, this side I pushed a little too hard on, and it made the stone tilt up, and then I can't get it to lay back down on this other side. Like I said, don't attempt this when you're in a hurry. Take it slow. Don't try to rush it. But
So then you have to pull the prongs back and,
it's still at a fairly easy to reverse stage. I haven't done any cutting of the prongs or anything like
Right.
that. And then just really take your time.
how do you cut the prongs when the stone's in there?
A saw, depending on what type of stone. A lot of this depends on what type of stone you're working with. If you're working with garnets or sapphires, rubies, diamonds, anything like that, don't worry about it. You could probably use a sawzall and everything would be fine. Just once everything's done, cut the prong. Don't cut it too short. You can still make adjustments with your cut burs. Basically, what you would do, let's see. Too big. still too big. All right. So when you're finished, you come along, cut off the excess. On this, you're really not going to have much excess. I set this stone fairly high out there. I think that the setting is a little too small for this stone, and I kind of pushed it a little bit, but you can make it work. Then you'd come along with the cup burr, put it over each one of the prongs, and either by hand or with the machine very slowly, you'll just grind away a little bit of each prong.
Okay.
What angles should you come at?
Well, with a cup burr, there's not, you want to come down straight on top. The thing is, you are rounding it off so that you're not going to have any sort of flange that will stick off and scratch or catch on anything. And it also gives the prongs a very nice uniform appearance. They're all rounded exactly the same way by the exact same tool to the same dimensions, and they look perfect. It's a really nice finishing step.
Then you just come straight down.
Are those all in the stone setting set that you,
The stone setting set.
yeah?
That's that.
Something like this, or are these all pieces that you put together?
These are all pieces I put together. This was a kit of cup burrs,
Okay,
and then a couple others crept in there.
okay. Yeah,
Now, there's two ways you can do this. I prefer to use, like I said, square wire. And what I'll do is once I fold it over the top of the prong, then I will take, and see if you can tell me what's unusual about this guy. As soon as I can find it.
Safety edged.
Triangle. So you're gonna, yeah.
It's got a safety edge on it. I put that on myself. That's a very, very coarse file. And one of those corners has no teeth on it at all. I took it off with a piece of sandpaper or something. I can't remember what I did. And then polished it a little bit. You know, what I do with that is you put the safety edge on the stone, and then you hold the triangle. I've got an idea. Okay, so say this is my safety edge down on the bottom. Then the prongs here, the file will ride down the prong, and so long as you keep this portion flat, it'll ride down the prong, and it will bevel the prong evenly on each side. So you just go down this side and file it, and this side and file it, and I bring it into a point so that it looks like almost like a little claw. I like that look a little bit better. It looks a little more Art Deco-y, and I just like that better than the rounded.
So you have the safety edge, so it's like a triangle like this, or like that, and
Yeah.
then
So
you
this
just-
one will have
that
no
parts,
teeth down on here.
and that touches the stone.
Right. So that rides over the surface of the stone without marring.
As your
Yeah.
okay.
And
Yeah.
I will. There we go. So, and I mean, hey, what's going on? I mean, constantly check that you are putting down the safety edge on that stone. I cannot stress that enough, especially on the softer stones. All it would take is one pass with that, and then it'd start over time. Now, there are ways. If you slip and scuff a stone, which is going to happen, okay? It happens to everybody. If you slip and scuff a stone, if it's a cabochon, we have a product called ZAM. It's a polishing agent. It is a metal polish that has aluminum oxide in it, and I use it as a final polish on all my stones whenever I do lapidary work. If in a pinch or an emergency, it can be used to polish out a minor scuff on a stone and bring it back to looking good as new. Just do your best not to. All right, so, sorry, I was hoping that ring would come out perfect, but that's what you get for trying something you've never done in front of a crowd.
It did come out perfect because you learned something from it.
Oh, absolutely.
No, we all
So
learned.
it's still perfect.
Yeah. I have very little ego. I'll mess up it for you guys. Here are some. These are some of the more of the oddball things that I've come up with.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You did that with clay and then electroformed it, right?
Yep.
Really?
That was
That hurt.
basically me screwing around and real late at night going, I wonder what would happen. And I made the whole thing out of clay and then electroformed it into place.
How did you electroform it?
That's a whole other
One
discussion.
of the class.
If
It's an
you
hour
want to
and
discuss
15-minute
that,
video on
stick
that. It's
around
great.
afterwards and we'll talk about it.
No, I'll watch the video and then I'll ask questions.
Right.
Okay, here are some of the worst, and you guys see if you can figure out ways to set these things. Ammonites,
Oh.
okay? Those things are oh yeah, go right ahead. I've done a bunch of different ways with them. Nothing's made me real happy. I've considered doing like a spine along the outside edge with prongs that would basically just grab it along the perimeter. You may occasionally run into something called a double cab. I am absolutely in love with this type of cut. It does some really neat stuff with light, but unfortunately it makes a rounded back. So,
So we do that one too.
It's pretty.
yeah,
It is.
these are great stones. I love the way it kind of messes with light.
Yeah, you don't want the bathhouse in.
No. Now that one, it's kind of a little like halfway prong, halfway bezel. You're going to make an open bezel on the back. You know, all of Asia with jade, any sort of clear jade is cut that way. It will always be cut that way because it makes a simple stone far more appealing. But you cut basically a seat for it. You do your best to match the angle of the bottom round of the stone, and then you put simple prongs around the outside edge. And then you just fold them over and it holds it in place.
We have a guy in our club that uses step bezel
Mhm.
or something like that.
Sure.
What is step bezel? Is it actually got a ridge in it?
Yep.
He puts it around the outside and that's it.
I've never worked with it, but I have seen 1,001
Yeah.
pieces. Like you could take something like this, and then you would use a step bezel, and you would shape the stone, or shape the bezel, and the stone would sit in here. You may need to alter this corner right there a little bit.
Is he just using wider bezel wire and
forming it around, or?
Well, you can do
Or is
one
there
of two
something
things.
That's actually called step bezel.
There is something actually called step bezel. You could take a piece of this and all right. So you take some of the wide bezel wire, and then you could solder it like that.
Okay.
Or you could put actual sterling wire on the inside, however you want to do it, just so that it's. Hey, how's it going? And then basically that would provide a little platform for the stone to sit on, and then you'd fold the bezel over as per usual. Now there's something we did not talk about, which I really should. I apologize. Tube setting. And I just realized I forgot all about that. Okay. Tube setting. This is, and we've got them pre-made, so you don't even have to cut the seat. You just need to find a tube that's larger in diameter than the stone you want to set, and a burr that's small, the size of the stone that's going to be smaller than the inner diameter of the tube. So you're going to take a tube, and now this will only work with rounds. And you will cut the seat, and then drop the stone in, and then fold the edges of the tube over to capture the stone. This can be soldered into place wherever you want. So you can drop a little faceted stone any place within a couple minutes. And this goes very, very fast.
Is there some kind of formula to know how far to use the burr down in so you don't end up with too big of a lip to it?
No.
No.
You want it to be just slightly deeper than the height of the girdle of the stone. But if you go too far, a couple quick swipes with a file will remedy that situation.
Yeah.
Let me go grab some 3mm CZs. Wait. These might work. Sharpen my wax.
I need one of those.
These are cool.
That actually looks like a pretty good fit. Okay, let me put my eyeballs. Make sure that it's under. Ooh, maybe a bit too much. Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, so people will overcomplicate this all the time. Yeah. Just make sure that your hand and the tube are coming together straight on. You don't need any special jig, just done it.
Slow and steady, right?
Yep. Slow and steady. And check off.
What kind of burr are you using?
This is called a setting burr, and I'll show you what it's doing here in just a second. If you're only going to get one type of burr, I recommend these guys. There's a whole host of confusing burrs out there. Bearing burrs, heart burrs, setting burrs. Am I missing any?
Oh, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part about burrs is that nobody really learns which burr works best in which situations, so they'll end up using a burr that kind of works. And like, for instance, you talked something about bearing burrs and heart burrs, and those are burrs where the setting burr has a straight edge and then a cone on the end. So the straight edge makes why he's putting it into the tube is that the point goes down into the tube and helps center it, and then the straight edges are cutting evenly around the tube, so it makes it nice and even. Whereas a bearing burr doesn't have straight edges, it has an angle, so there's basically, it's kind of like shaped like a stone, where it's got almost like a girdle around the edge, and that's incredibly sharp, and people will, oh yeah, I can use that the same thing, and what happens is it doesn't help you line things up like the straight edges do, and they'll end up cutting things off left and right, and invariably they'll think that this burr is too sharp or uneven, where it's actually the wrong burr.
So you want to do this part before you actually cut the tube and solder it into yours,
Sure.
right? wanna
You
do-
can.
Otherwise,
I oftentimes will just cut off a piece of tubing and then file it. Once you get confident with it, then you know what you're doing and what you need, and
Okay.
then you can drop this tubing into place, and then you can set it by hand using a burnisher, or you can use a bezel punch or a bezel closing punch.
So any of this stuff I can talk about.
Or you just make a really awesome piece of tubing.
True, true.
Right.
I think this burr may be just a touch too large. It's kind of removing some of the tubing as I go. Maybe I'm just being a little too careful. Let's see if that worked.
All right. Sorry about that. All right. You have a great day then. All right. Bye-bye.
These are not calibrated. These little orange sapphires are not calibrated, so it's kind of hit or miss on whether or not one's going to match up to the burr that I've got.
Got it?
All right. Here, hold this.
I'm not sure which one of us is shaking more.
Yeah.
I was doing that a little one for dramatic purpose. All right, so that will sit down in there, and then you just fold the tube over. When you've got all the pieces lined up, ready to go, and you're working with calibrated stones, that takes seconds to do.
Really?
Wow.
But
I've watched a YouTube video where they did it where it's already soldered on,
mhm.
but then they take something and put over it and hammer it.
Yep, that's a bezel setting punch.
That's what's-
They're back in stock.
Oh, dude,
Yeah, they came in yesterday.
excellent.
Yeah.
So you can use that, or you can use
Mhm.
a regular
The bezel setting
pusher.
punches make it an absolute breeze. I cannot sing their praises enough.
And it's okay to hit it.
Oh yeah,
I just,
But you need a bunch of different sizes.
yeah. You want to make sure you've got the correct size, and it's actually. I try not to hit it right off the bat.
Can't even
I'll
see
usually kind of roll it around the edge and then get it set. What happens is if you hit it with a hammer first time around, the stone will jump as you're doing that, and you'll end up with
Loose stone that wobbles around.
or one that's ever so slightly crooked.
With a stone in there, you want to have that set on whatever you're going to do before you put the stone in, right? Or do you use some of that stone protection stuff?
Hey, what's going on? No, I don't use any stone protection stuff.
But so you have to set that on whatever you're gonna do before you set the stone.
Yes, unless
You
it's
can't
like,
solder it after.
unless it's a heat resistant stone. Here's a wacky one. That's a type of
Okay.
setting that I came up with for spheres.
Well, that's different.
Here we go. This is one that I tapped into place.
Whoa.
Okay, I gotta take a picture.
There's,
Just too cute.
put that in here. I don't like those
Okay.
guys.
Just,
I'm protective over that
I
one.
don't, I just think it's so cute with the marble hanging off the end.
And you just
That's a little quartz sphere.
put it straight on, make sure it's plumb, and then just hit it.
That is water clear AAA grade quartz.
Really?
Yep.
I'm gonna have to break down my ones.
We've been
Of
out
course,
of them
it's
for
swinging as I
months.
try to.
Yeah, last time I came
This
in, I
is
was
what
actually looking
happens
for this.
when
You guys didn't have any. I was like, oh, well,
You
we'll
do
just
not
use it.
set the
Leave it
stone
in.
first.
I mean, I was even ordering in Swiss ones just so I could get
Before
something,
you
and then
tap
those
it in
ran out
place.
too.
And it's gold, isn't it?
That's a little ruby in there.
It still looks good.
I know. I love that ring.
Just
Oh, that's pretty.
because I've never done it before and I wanted to learn.
I love
It
that.
just-
That texture came out
Yeah,
really nicely.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a cute little ring.
Did you do that through the mill or did you do it with?
I did that by hand.
By hand.
And then I put it through a rolling mill
Linda, it's Michelle
to
from
flatten the
FDJ.
sides because it kind of
Okay.
squished the top a little
Hi.
bit. And then
Okay,
you run it through a
I
rolling
do
mill
not have
2
that
times.
feet that I thought I
In
had.
one direction
And then
to
the
stretch
other,
it, and then the other. And
I,
thank you.
but I do have, I have dead soft round in
I like the
19.
way that hangs. It's
I've
just
got 20
different.
feet of that.
It's just,
Can you use it?
you know, the way
It's
it's
gonna
hanging
work
from
as long as
apart,
you're
but not.
working.
And I always kind of felt that necklaces, the back was wasted space. And if you're going to be wearing a fancy necklace, you know,
Hello?
if you're going and dressing
Oh, okay, I was
the
afraid I
nines.
lost you.
and you've got a necklace, then why not put something on the back?
Exactly. It's just.
Hey, how's it going?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is it okay coming in and look?
Yeah, absolutely. Come on in. Other weird ones that I've come against. This is grape agate.
Yeah,
I
so this is the
Had
19
that sitting on the
one you were using.
shelf, wondering when I was going to get around to that. Large chunk stone. So I absolutely love the shape of that. I wouldn't dream of cutting it. So
10 feet of it?
you know, how would you set something like that?
That is neat.
I'd do a wire basket, but that's just the welder in me coming out. You
Yeah.
got something awkwardly shaped you don't want to move, you build a cage around it.
Yeah.
Don't want to go anywhere.
Well,
All right, so
I mean,
10
think
feet.
about
So at
you've
least
got
you can get your thing done.
you build the shape around it, and then you
All right.
bring in wire with basically
So
a
I will
setting
get this
pad.
10 feet shipped
make
out to you
contact
this
with the
afternoon. You
surface.
should have it tomorrow.
Do it on the other side, do it around the perimeter, and then basically you've got
welcome.
maybe
Bye-bye.
4, 5, 6 different little pads that come in from a perimeter and then touch the stone. And then once you've got everything in the place that you want it, you solder it in place and then fold those pads around each one of their little specific spots. And then you could trap anything any way you see fit.
You gonna write 'em?
I like spheres, so I found somebody that cut an amethyst as a faceted sphere.
Oh, beautiful.
Now, that one I've got the frog fingers. I've got a little 5-piece frog finger hand that's going to hold that.
We have to let him see that he's getting these beautiful.
Oh, okay.
He'll just freak.
I'm glad I didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
But I know that I had some frustrations today, but honestly, sit down, some quiet time, cut a seat, a place for the stone to sit, and then just put some prongs around it and fold them over. Where is...
You gotta look at the faceting.
I lost it. Oh, yeah, here's a channel setting. This guy, right in front of me. Like, just make a base, drill a hole, cut notches, put the prongs in, and then call it a day. Okay? You can fold those over, cut them off, and make a nice, simple facet stone setting. And it's really, I mean, granted, that little square princess cut thing,
Yeah.
prongs can be a real pain. But if you want the look of prongs and you want to bring in faceted stones into your work, it doesn't need to be that complicated.
That's awesome.
All right?
So what did you use to make the box? What?
It's just sheet.
Sheet?
Yeah, I threw that together in about 45 minutes last night. I had, and I used a little cross-cut cylinder burr to cut the notches. And I went back with a file and just made sure that they're a little more square to fit the square wire. If you use round wire, it will snap right into place. And then I went back with a round burr and then cut off the excess. And then that matched close enough to make a seat.
What suggestions do you have for those of us that don't have that handy little thing for holding that? Okay, that's,
You know, honestly, this is very nice, but it is not necessary. I don't have one at home. I do all my work without it. And as soon as I can find that bench pin, I could.
Did you set it straight down underneath?
Under the paper towel, always the best place. Okay.
Nothing like a clean bench to find everything, right?
Sounds like me. Where's this?
Oh, I can't see anything. I lose it almost immediately after I put it down.
That must be what I'm not doing.
What?
I'm working on that and all of a sudden the bottom falls out.
I like that.
It's new, so it's slippery.
Take your bench pin, wrap it in painter's tape, make it as snug as possible. The one I have at home, I have to hammer into place with my
Mine's
rawhide mallet.
different. Mine's held on with clamps on my bench.
So
Handmade.
that's, and you should be working almost entirely on your bench pin. Now, when you work, put it in the
Right.
ring clamp like this, and then hold it in the V so that,
So you're pressing on it too,
yeah.
in case that
There
comes out.
is
Okay.
another
Makes more
type over
sense.
there that has a lip that runs around the top that sits in the bench pin,
Oh,
and that holds it
okay.
even more stable. It's a really good idea.
Took my flex shaft with a cheap little Dremel sanding drum and used that to do that exact thing
There you
to
go.
mine.
Ah.
Because I did it to both sides, both the flat and the round side. Because
Good idea.
when I would go to put, because I didn't know to wrap my bench pin in tape. That's a great idea. I'm gonna do that when I get home. But I would go to start doing stuff and it would slip and throw whatever it was I was working with out because it knocked the wedge out.
Now, they have an actual bench pin that works with that. That makes it an even tighter fit, and it's nice. But if you just want the ring clamp, that works just as well too. And then that catches right there on that
Yeah.
lip, and that makes for a nice secure hold.
yeah.
And honestly, unless this is great, but let's work you up to that point.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
These are made to be chewed up, sawed up, burned, ground, everything else.
Yeah.
Go
They
nuts,
don't cost very much.
abuse
Right,
them,
right.
and then buy another
Buy
one.
another one when you're.
All right.
Yeah.
Now this one's not that beat up, but my bench pin at home looks like a dog's chew toy. If yours doesn't look like that, then you're not using it enough.
Or you just made another one.
Yeah, or you just made another one. Seriously. Think about the metal, not about the bench pin, and
Right.
just go to town. All right.
I did all kinds of crazy mods to my bench pin at the house. I put filing lines so I can actually like set wire in, and it's little tiny thin. It just tapers to a real serious point, so I can put wire in there and I can file the end of the wire to an absolute point.
Yeah.
I've got
Nice.
spots on the sides so I can stick, flat stock or stick a file in there and start the file and know it's at a 90 to the top. All kinds of
Yeah, those are
fun.
all good
That's
ideas.
cool.
Pinterest.
Yeah.
Pinterest, 15 minutes on Pinterest, and I found that, and I was like, I'm doing this.
Almost needed.
So, any questions?
I got a question on setting burrs. Is that kind of stone size specific? As you move up in stone sizes, you have no choice but to get the progressively larger burrs.
Okay.
I lose burrs.
Understand. Hey, with your setting burrs, try to put them all in one place and contain them in a perfect world. In reality, do your best. It is not necessary to have the exact size of the stone, but if you're not using the exact size, then you have to have a really steady hand.
Okay, so I need to buy setting burrs.
Or measure twice or 3 times and cut once.
If you're cutting a seat in a burr, it works best if the burr is the circumference of the stone.
Okay.
That being said, a lot of times you cannot get a burr that's the exact size of the stone safely into the prongs all at once unless they are absolutely perfect. Sometimes you really, especially like with that really nice orange shaped stone, this guy. Orange shaped. What
know
exactly
what
is an orange shaped? Orange,
Rounded.
comma, shaped stone. All right. So if you look, that one's kind of off kilter.
Oh, yeah.
This is actually off to the side, so I can't just drop a setting burr in and cut all 4 seats at once. I'm going to have to do something completely different on this side than I would on this side. So that being said, what I'm going to have to do is take a small burr and go in there and cut and shape each one of those seats.
Okay.
All right?
Or if you have, say, a 20 millimeter stone, you're not going to find a 20 millimeter stone.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. You know, it's a case-by-case basis. If you're going to do large bezels, and the stone's not round, you can't just, cut it. What?
Is that my tea mug?
Yes.
Now you know where it went.
So, if you were
That's
to,
my tea mug.
not anymore,
Purpose.
It doesn't,
bad I
they'll
don't-
be back.
it's not too dirty, so
Well,
you,
I stopped drinking
Reclaim
tea in the summer, so.
you don't
So
need it.
you would need to cut a large bezel for this. Then you need to, and this one is a real pain, but it's if you go slow, it's not too bad. Say this is a large bezel, and you're cutting it for something like that. Actually, that would really work. So now, let's also suppose that that's not a perfectly round object. Okay, round objects are great. So what you would have to do is go around the perimeter of this, and I would,
You want to scribe it first?
yeah, you really need to make sure that you're working on the exact same level. Okay. So there, that's going to be my seat line. So I would then lay that down on the scribe line. And then just very slowly to begin with, cut just a little tiny bit. And then maybe apply a little bit more pressure as we went along, and then cut a groove notch. Well, not groove, but you would cut an indent for that to sit in. And that's going to taper down with a place for the stone to sit. and you have to do that by eye, by hand, check often, okay?
Do a pass, check it, do a pass, check it,
Right,
do a pass,
and
check
then you would fold that silver over at the end, just like you would a normal bezel, and lock that ring in there. It's gonna be very similar to this guy.
it. Okay.
That's basically what that was.
Okay.
It looks fantastic, and that is an indestructible setting. If the, I mean,
So good.
the stone is extremely hard. That stone's never going to break, and that setting can survive whatever I throw at it. You know, that's my daily wear ring, so you know I want it to be pretty tough.
There's your list, guy.
All right. What else?
Carol Christian?
I see people on Facebook setting unique shade stones, and I've also taken on, like, you know, the filing notches out of the corners, that kind of thing. Some people, and I can't figure out how they do it, actually can just push the bezel around enough and ease it, and so there's no wrinkle. And I always have problems with that if I don't cut a notch out.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm
To get
saying?
the
Like,
metal to flow?
say it's a triangle stone.
Gotcha. Corners.
Don't cut the corners out.
You don't cut the corners out. What you want to do.
We consolidated our last warehouses.
Okay, so, squares, triangles, anything with a sharp corner. The sharper the corner, the more difficult it is. So you've got a stone,
Very, very cheap.
let's say that this is a corner, and the bezel's up here, but you need in order for it to close in over
Can I
the
see what
corner,
stuff you're selling?
in order to do that without wrinkling, what you need it to do is drop as it's coming up to the corner.
Oh.
And-
So it's not even all the way around.
Right, but
Even
if
though
you,
it looks like it.
if you do it very gradually, nobody will notice. Because the more metal you have to fold over an edge, the more likely it is that it's going to have a wrinkle in it.
Okay.
So you don't need much. You just need, you know, the cabochon's got that little bit of a tapered or a flat side. You just need for it to barely come up over that point on the stone, and it's captured. It's not going anywhere.
Okay.
All right? So if you want the stone to be covered, that's fine. But as it comes down to that corner, just file it ever so slightly down to meet the corner and just have it barely come over the edge.
Okay.
And
That
then
makes
it
sense.
will be a piece of cake. And then you will never fear corners ever again.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about, cutting it out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using, say, sterling
Oh, we're gonna need some help up here.
sheet or wire or something like that that's fairly substantial, you can get away with doing that. But with the pure silver bezel wire, I think it's a little on the soft, flimsy side to be cutting things out.
Okay. Too late.
Live and learn.
Well, I mean, you can get by with it.
It worked.
Eh. It's just, I always fear that one of those little corners is gonna catch on a pocket or something like that, and it's gonna open it up. I don't mess with serrated wire, I don't know, that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. But hey, if you want
I will
to.
try that now. Live and learn.
Yeah. You can, any sort of, I made this one, like you can take an amethyst stone, if you look at it from the top. So it's an amethyst crystal, but it's got this really strange silhouette. You know, stone like you would anything else. Solder it to the back plate, cut that out. This stone went on to become, it had this cutout in the middle, and I cast this little tiny guy with a fishing pole that sat right on the edge, and he was fishing into the amethyst. It looked like $1 million. You know, And it looked really difficult, but honestly, it's just a normal old bezel that, and you take that simple step and turn it into whatever you want. What else you got? Nothing? That's it? That's all the questions?
I think that's it.
It's all the questions that can be remembered now. Once it
Yeah.
gets uploaded up to the internet,
I can only
I'll have
process so
10 more
much. I'm
questions
just
for you.
like
Once I get
trying
home, I'll
to.
do whatever.
Absorb it all.
Was over. I probably should have tried those out, but honestly, those suckers were so thin that I didn't feel that I needed them. They probably would have just made matters a little harder. But these can be a big help when you're doing simple solitaire type settings. They clamp over the top, they bring the prong down, set them into place. Rifflers, shaped files. These can be invaluable. You can get little tiny cross sections and get into places that you can't get into with anything else.
Do they make one that looks like a knife now? It's flat compared to this, and the
They-
blade is on,
Oh, yeah.
okay, that does not come in a
Lots of
regular
different
set,
shapes and
does it?
sizes, yeah.
Gravers.
Yes.
A graver. Is excellent for poking holes in your finger. But exactly like this type of setting, where it's just a hole that I drilled out and then shaped it with a setting burr, you drop the stone in and then you go around the edge and you start low, bring the graver in, push up and over, and this little tiny bead of metal will hold. Now, obviously, you're going to need a bigger bead of metal for something this size, but if it's a little tiny stone, then all you need is just that little tiny scoop. You bring it in low.
For like gypsy setting, right?
Yeah, or flush setting, or, I mean, not flush setting, but bead setting.
Okay.
And then
You do
push,
4.
you push in, you can do as many as you like. Fold up, and then you would use what's called a bead setting tool, which is, think of it kind of like this, except without teeth on the inside. It's a high polished little semicircle. You put it over that little tiny bead of metal, and then you just kind of roll it around, and it polishes that up and hardens it, and then that traps the stone in place. You've just raised a prong out of a flat surface.
Cool.
Just general shaping.
Yeah. A couple little good hammers. Find yourself, I went on this quest for like the perfect ball peen hammers. Get yourself a couple of those. A goldsmith hammer is a really nice way to do things like that heavy hammered bezel. You're going to need a hammer. This one's the type that's made for exactly that sort of thing. Yeah, find the ones that you like the most.
Yeah, I like that little tiny one. Isn't that cute?
That is a exceedingly fancy rare hammer.